Okay, I want to continue on with like a series, I guess, if you will. Uh, uh, Rebuking and correcting. I call him a con man. He's a liar. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He's a liar. He's uh, he's a modern day false prophet, uh, attempting by the will of God to make the young in faith stumble. And he's successful, but of course God brings his children back. But I'm here to preach the truth for the sake of the elect. Now, I'm getting this particular screenshot from a guy named Ryan Galmier. Galmier, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, man. I'm going to link to this video in the description. I recommend everybody go watch it because he just nails Mr. Flowers here, and he's correct. And it's regarding Matthew 23:37. And this is important because it's a very famous verse that Jesus says, O Jerusalem, how often I would have gathered you like a chick gathers his hens under her wings, but you were not willing, or you would not. And Mr. Flowers falsely, and just like a lot of preachers, he's not the only one, thinks that Jesus is trying to save people, but they're just not willing. He's willing to save people, but they're just not willing because they got a free will. It's really just stupid. I'm going to go over the verse and some of the Greek there because it's important. This guy never looks at the Greek. So he puts up this slide. Jesus was willing to gather Israel under his wings, but under his wings. He was willing to save them, but they were not willing, meaning they were not willing to be saved. I mean, it's just really stupid because that's not what Jesus said. We just look closely, especially the Greek. You have to look at the Greek. First of all, Jesus starts out, O Jerusalem. That in Greek is what's called a vocative. Jesus is rebuking the Pharisees. As Mr. Ryan points out, if you look at the context and you just go back up here, he is railing on the Pharisees. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. He's just killing them. That is the context, as Mr. Ryan correctly points out. And he culminates his rebuke of the Pharisees here. O Jerusalem. There's a little more about the Pharisees I want to mention. Mr. Ryan did not, because it's important. Thou killest the prophets and stonest them which sent thee. How, and here we go. How often, and then these words here, would I have gathered. This would I have is not in Greek. It's not there. I'll get there in just a second. Thy children together. I would have gathered thy children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and ye would not. So Jesus is doing something, and the Pharisees are not. Do you see that? Jesus isn't trying to save them, and they're refusing. Jesus is doing something, and they are not. And so, how often, let me see, how often I would have gathered, okay, that's this Greek word here. How often, and this is a form of the word thelema in Greek, which is will or determine or want. And it's in what's called an aorist indicative form. Now, an aorist indicative is simply, it's a word that used to express things that happen in general without asserting a time. So aorist, the literal word aorist means no time bound, and it's indicative. So it's what Jesus is willing it's an action word. It's an action that he's doing, not time bound. So Jesus is saying that how many times he's willing at whatever time. And what is he willing? To gather the chicks, under a wing, like a hen. And not willing. It's the same word right up here. It's the exact same word. Where is it? You can see. It's the exact same word. Willing. Aorist, indicative. Jesus is willing to gather the chicks, and they are not willing to gather the chicks. It's a rebuke. Not Jesus is saying, oh, I want to save you, and you're not willing. It's just not. Not. Ude, behold, your oikos, house left desolate. Now empty. That doesn't mean void of people. That means void of truth. Because the Pharisees were not preaching the truth. That's what he's getting them for. As Mr. Ryan pointed out, he's railing them for not preaching the truth. And what are they preaching? They're preaching halakha. In Matthew 5, when Jesus, Sermon on the Mount, and you heard it said, but I say, that's a rebuke of the Pharisees. This is all a rebuke of the Pharisees for their what's called the halakha. The halakha was what has become the Mishnah, Midrash, or the Talmud. It's a twisting of the scripture, which began back in Babylon when they were in captivity. They started what's called synagogues, where they didn't have their scriptures, and so they're stuck in Babylon, and they began this what's called halakha, trying to explain the scriptures. So you have, Miriam over in Babylon comes into the synagogue and says, well, I'm not supposed to do anything on the Sabbath. And then the rabbi says, well, you can do this, you can do that, but you can't do this, and you can't do that, and you can't do that. That's orally tradition telling them that's halakha, which became the Talmud, which is a twisting of scripture. And that is what Jesus is rebuking them for. I'm teaching them correctly. I'm teaching them the truth. How often do I teach them the truth and you don't? O Jerusalem, rebuke. And now your house, the house of the Pharisees, is left desolate, void of truth. That's what Jesus said. Not what people like this twist it to say. They're always saying, well, you got to look at context. Yeah, you got to look at the context. And the context was the rebuke of the Pharisees. And what Jesus said at the end there about, O Jerusalem, is rebuking them for not teaching the truth, for teaching halakha. That's what it's about. The man is just a liar. I'm sorry, people don't like it, but he's just a bold-faced liar. There's no other way to say it. Now, I'm going to link to Mr. Ryan's video in the description. You can go listen. He does a great job, and I would recommend it.